All right, so Tony kicks off season 4 with some forward planning that includes hiding piles of cash in the duck food storage bin and telling Dr. Melfi that he intends to outmaneuver the only two possible fates for a guy like him, death by hit or life in prison, by limiting his business communications to blood family, meaning grooming Christopher to act on his behalf and eventually take over the Soprano family. This leads Tony to make the decision to pass over Patsy Parisi and make Christopher acting captain while Polly is briefly in jail. I know we're not getting too deep into plot points, but I just wanted to point this out because I think this passing over of Patsy is worth keeping in mind for later. Tony continues to covet nearly every unavailable woman he sees. He sleeps with Uncle Junior's caregiver, Svetlana, and is affronted when she doesn't want a repeat encounter. He continues to show interest in Dr. Melfi right up until he decides to quit going to therapy. He beats Assemblyman Zellman with a belt because he's seeing Tony's ex-mistress, Irina. He starts an affair with Ralph's trophy girlfriend, Valentina, which may be part of the reason, in addition to believing that Ralph is responsible for the death of their horse, Pyomai, that Tony brutally murders Ralph. Uncle Junior's trial starts and is then put on hold when he falls on the courthouse steps and his lawyer starts working on a dementia defense. When the judge eventually decides Junior is fit enough and the trial continues, the Soprano family gets goons to threaten a juror. This plan succeeds, and a mistrial is declared due to a hung jury. Junior is free and possibly demented. Janice starts the season with stealing Ralphie from Rosalie, then decides to break it off with him by gently pushing him down the stairs. When Bobby Bacala's wife dies, she goes after Bobby full throttle, using everything from stolen lasagna to Ouija boards to get her man. Polly spends a lot of this season backstabbing Tony via payphone calls to Johnny Sack from jail. He thinks he's laying the groundwork to be made boss if the Lupertazzi family eventually takes out Tony, and Johnny Sack encourages this, but Polly is disillusioned when he runs into Carmine after being released from jail, and Carmine has no idea who he is. That was harsh. He quickly beats a path back to kissing Tony's ass. Christopher hits bottom with his drug addiction this season, while his fiancée Adriana becomes an unwilling informer for the feds. In what has to be the worst trip ever, Christopher shoots some heroin one night and immediately gets a call to go dismember and dispose of Ralph's body. On another drug-fueled night, he sits on Adriana's dog, breaking her neck, and this leads to a tragicomic intervention staged by the Soprano family and Christopher being admitted to rehab. All right, I saved the best character for last, I think, from this season anyway. Carmela spends season 4 trying to protect her financial future by stealing money from the duck food bin and trying to get Tony to let her cousin do some investing and estate planning for them, all the while having a desperate crush on Furio. When Furio moves back to Italy because of his unrequited feelings for Carmela, she falls into depression. The season culminates with a vicious phone call from Irina telling Carmela that Tony has been sleeping with her cousin, Svetlana, and Carmela has a tour de force meltdown. She kicks Tony out of the house. When he refuses to leave, she eviscerates him with an explicit confession of how much she loved Furio, and he finally gives up. The marriage is over. So, what's your favorite performance in season 4?
It's got to be Carmela, I think.
Right?
And
I feel like this is her season.
This is Carmela and Christopher's season, I think. They're really front and center.
Yeah.
And it feels very much like a culmination of previous seasons in terms of what they've gone through. It really comes to a boil in this season, I think. Season 4 has always been a bit strange to me in terms of how I thought of it. It feels like the most formless season, and it seems to be the season with the least kind of mafia stuff going on. It's much more about family and domestic squabbles and things like that. And
yeah,
it's hard to
like. I mean, it does. It almost plays like more like a straight drama soap opera season.
Yeah, it's like a kitchen sink drama, especially that final episode. Because you can pick out really definitive sort of storylines from the previous seasons, like, you know, Richie and Janice in season 2 and season 3, Jackie and Gloria. But this season is much more like this falling apart of various characters like Kamala and Paulie and things like that. It's more about relationships.
Yeah, it is. It's more about relationships. And I can't remember who said it on your first Sopranos podcast, but I don't know if character assassination is the right term, but Tony definitely starting to turn into someone we don't like as much. I mean, he's been doing despicable acts right along, but he seems to get, ever more selfish and
Mm.
self-pitying at the same time, and punishing. He's really just punishing the people around him more and more for very petty imagined infractions, or for jealousy over their girlfriend or whatever. He's becoming a lot less likable to me in this season.
Yeah, I think it's part of it might be power corrupts. Like he's been the boss for a while now, and I
Right.
think it's the first episode where it's the scene where like a bunch of stewardesses from like Icelandic Air come
Mhm.
in, and two of them like making out on the bed, and he's watching them just
Right.
smoking a cigar, and it's so
Yeah, that was
sort of
weird.
indulgent and patriarchal and weird. Like he's the boss and he's just surveying his
Yeah.
kingdom or something, and just constant indulgences and vices. So that
Yeah.
the idea of corruption, I think, is
And
important. And
everyone dancing to his tune.
exactly, yeah, yeah.
And this may be the season where Carmela points out that, the laughs he gets are fake laughs, or from people who are afraid of him.
I think
That
that's
kind of
season
a.
five, but yeah,
Oh, is it?
definitely.
I'm sorry.
Because I just remember Feach just giving him daggers when he tells the joke.
Oh, yeah.
Everyone else is laughing uproariously, and
Yeah, you're right.
Feach
That's
is in the
season
background
5.
grimacing.
Yeah, yeah.
I love Feach.
Yeah, he's pretty good.
But I mean, let's talk about Carmela. So this is
Oh,
definitely
Carmela.
a season where she is becoming very sort of resentful of her place in the world, and the fact that she has so little power and so little independence, and is so dependent on Tony financially, emotionally, sexually, everything.
Yeah. And at the same time, she's truly fallen in love.
Yeah,
It's an obsessive, unrequited, crazy crush kind of love.
it's
But,
half adorable and half like tragic. It's
yeah. Well, and it's kind of like and like we said before, she's been with Tony since she was in high school.
I know
So
she's never had
when she falls
any
in love again,
experiences.
it's not
Yeah,
going to be an adult, mature love. It's going to be starting from that same sort of point,
that's a great
and
point. Yeah.
that's what it feels like. It's like the very next relationship. Furio would be like the kind of crush he had maybe in college, right after high school. And yeah, it's just she's so sad. The way she checks herself in the mirror every time the doorbell rings, and
Well, Furio is such a contrast to Tony in how sort of earnest he is and how in touch he is with, I guess, culture and food and life. Like
he's
he
so much
really
more
lives life,
authentic.
whereas
Yeah.
he's authentic, yeah, and Tony's much more indulgent. And there's a great contrasting shot where I think Furio is making pasta and from
Yeah, I was
scratch and
just gonna
pouring
bring that
himself some
up.
wine and sitting down at this beautiful sort of rustic table, and Tony pulls some
Tony's
lasagna out
sticking
of
the
the fridge
ziti
and
in the
sticks it in the
microwave.
microwave, and he stares at the buttons for like 2 minutes because he can't figure out what to do, and it's very comical, like Fred
That's the most
Flintstone or something.
beautiful illustration of the difference between those two guys, isn't it?
And the difference between maybe American kind of materialism or consumerism and this kind of how we
Yeah,
think of this old European style of life.
definitely. Yeah. Just the speed and ease and superficiality over, taking your time and having
It's
things be of good quality, and observing real tradition instead of
it's
giving
constant,
lip service to
yeah,
it. And,
exactly. It's constant consumption as opposed to actually going through the process of creating food and putting love into it,
hmm
things like that. I mean,
Yeah.
cuisine plays a huge role in this series,
Yeah.
aesthetically, and just that process of creating food and how important it is to gather around a food table. It's very much part of the family
Yeah.
dynamic.
What was I going to say about Fury? Oh, I guess, it didn't strike me on the first watch of the series, but on the rewatch, I didn't realize how much it was reciprocated, the feelings with Carmela. He's crazy about her too.
Yeah, it's
And he has a real crisis. He nearly pushes Tony into a helicopter blade. Do you remember that?
yeah. I
Yeah.
because he goes back to Italy and says, "I'm in love with the boss's wife," and the guy says,
Yeah.
you
His
can't do
uncle
anything
tells him,
unless you kill him."
yeah,
Yeah,
that's right. And he
and
has a moment there on that casino tarmac when Tony's drunk, taking a piss before they get on the plane, and he almost pushes him into that blade of the helicopter. Yeah, it's a helicopter that's
I mean,
waiting.
I know a lot of the scenes are really cheesy, but I just think they're adorable when Kamala keeps popping into his house to try and help him like
I
retile
know.
his garage,
She
and she
brings their
always
little
brings
decorating
she's always
magazine.
dragging AJ along as well, who's like complaining the whole time, and
Yeah,
it's almost like he's there to stop her from actually doing anything. He's there as a
yeah,
witness to show that it's all sweet, it's all innocent, but
yeah.
And Fury was just coming up with the most romantic sentences, and she's like, "Well, what do you think of this color?" And I'm sure we
Yeah,
can get the zoning permit on the house.
right.
It's great.
We should go to the tile store.
Oh, they
I
make a
would love
date at
to go there
the
with
tile
you.
store. Oh, it's so sad. And
It
when
is.
he and when she comes to his house one day and it's just empty, it's like the biggest gut punch in
Oh,
the world. It's so sad.
I can't
Oh,
believe he didn't say goodbye to her. Really. I mean, what would it have cost him? He went off back to Italy. He's fine. He's with his family. He's protected. He couldn't have called just to
I
say
wish he had
goodbye,
just sent like a
Carmela.
postcard or something. It's just so
Yeah.
cold and like he obviously cared
Yeah.
about her. Why would he?
He did, and that seemed out of character to me that he wouldn't have any parting thing to say to her. I don't know.
It was a complete just cut off. Like he couldn't. Maybe he thought she was in danger if he pursued it, or he would be
Maybe.
in danger. He just needed to cut it off at the hip
Yeah.
before it got any worse and
And
put
I
them
don't
both in
know how
danger.
much either one of them knew the feelings were reciprocated.
That's true. Yeah, she doesn't know, or she
She
senses
doesn't
it.
know. She thinks so. She hopes so, but she's willing to believe. I think when she's talking to Rosalie, confessing the whole thing to a degree that her own feelings might just be, you know, clouding her view of what he feels in return. But
And it
yeah,
is,
I
you're
don't know.
right. It is so high school almost because Rosalie's like,
It
"You're not
is.
having sex with him," and she's like, "No, it's not like that. We care about each
Yeah,
other."
they never even kissed.
Yeah, exactly. And
Oh,
it is this way out for Kamala because she does feel so trapped in this
yeah,
season. And one of the outs is, as you say, to steal some money from the bird feeder, which Tony brings up again in every single fight
I
from the rest of
know.
the series, which is just
I
hilarious how he
know.
pronounces bird feeder. But she gets that
I
money.
like how
She
she
puts in
uses that
some.
that fingernail to shut him up. The
Yeah.
fingernail that she finds in his
Oh,
pocket, the fake nail.
it's amazing. Like the tensions and the words unspoken and the fights
Yeah,
unfought in their relationship. It is so amazingly intricate and complex and
yeah,
full of love and resentment at the same time.
yeah.
It's so
And
complicated.
and to a degree, I do think, aside from striking out for independence, the moves she's trying to make financially are partially spurred on by seeing Angie Bump and Sarah working at the grocery store, and
Yeah.
after Pussy dies, and how she's in this tough financial position, and eventually she gets her own auto shop or whatever. But I think Carmela really does fear, just for the same reason she can't leave Tony. I think she really does fear if something happens to Tony that she will lose her status almost more than anything.
And in a way, she sort of passively supports that status, like the
Oh
role of
yeah,
the wife and all that. But at the same time, she is so resentful of it. And she's also
I know.
resentful of Meadow because she sees Meadow getting all of the things that she wants, a college education and a boyfriend and living in New York. And she
Oh
said, I'm not
yeah,
even going to have kids. And it's like, it just crushes her because she tries to go on that little date with her at that
at
place
the
in New York.
Plaza. Yeah,
Yeah, I
the
can't remember what
Plaza
it's called
Hotel.
with the white gloves and she's just
Yeah,
sitting there grimacing because Meadow has everything she could ever want, and she should be happy because this is Meadow is the young woman that she's been working her whole life to make into a happy life and a healthy young woman, but she can't help it. Wish
she
that was
can't
her
help
life
it.
that she was living.
It's so awful when she's just hitting rock bottom in her heartbreak, and they have to go to dinner at Meadows' house, and she's trying
Oh,
to sit there and be the smiling mother who's
and
happy and proud of her daughter when she's just dying inside.
that felt like one of the most authentic kind of dinners. Just
Yeah,
the tension you could feel between Tony and Kamala and her
yeah,
getting annoyed and angry and
yeah. And Tony, for once, being 100% likable and
yeah,
charming, and
he's a
it
great
was a
host. Yeah, making jokes,
yeah.
making the kids laugh.
Oh,
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely things about Kamala that I don't like and things she's done, but she's such a brilliant character. She's so well
yeah,
performed. I mean, we can save Whitecaps for the end of the discussion, but her performance
yeah. Oh wow,
is
yeah,
towering. It's amazing. The
yeah,
catharsis and release of that whole episode is just so
yeah.
visceral for the viewer.
I
Um,
remember listening to just about the only thing I could find on iTunes or something for an interview with Edie Falco about her role on Sopranos. It was like on NPR or something. And she was just saying part of what she did was not engage socially with any of the cast at all. She just went on to the set as Tony's wife. She thought of herself as Tony's wife. She did her scenes almost exclusively, just with Tony. And she really, I mean, as the seasons and the shooting progressed, she really said to a degree she felt those jealousies and hurts and, rage and all that kind of stuff because she didn't really develop relationships with anybody outside of
Oh, really?
the shooting
With the other
scenes. Yeah.
actors? Oh,
Yeah,
interesting.
no. The rest of them did. I guess they would all, go out party together or whatever, but she never did. I think part of
Yeah,
that too is
yeah.
that
The
she's
chemistry,
sober.
the chemistry between the different guys is definitely there, but I guess
Yeah.
yeah, there aren't as many scenes between Kamala and the other characters, or if they are,
Yeah.
they're very sort of formal occasions.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's
What
move
else
on
we
to
got?
Christopher's drug addiction.
Oh,
So
poor
this is where
Christopher.
again where it all comes to a boil. The last couple of seasons, we've seen it on and off again. It's sort of possibly have been a problem in previous seasons, but this is where it really runs out of
It's really,
control.
really
And it
bad.
seems to be very much a response to not only the mounting pressure of Tony wanting him to be a big part of this organization, and he says he's the future of this family, but also his relationship with Tony is very tense and strained. And he loves Tony and he thinks of Tony as a father figure, but Tony is very manipulative in the season, especially the first episode where he gets him to kill the cop that killed
Yeah.
Christopher's father.
Yeah. Yeah. With timing based on Tony's convenience.
Yeah.
Regardless of, how long he's let this whole thing go on for Christopher. That thing didn't sit well at all with, I'm sure Christopher on the surface, thanks him. And even later when things get really screwed up, he says, I'll never forget, how much I appreciate you letting me get that guy who killed my dad. But on some level, subconsciously, Christopher has to know that was a completely self-serving act, that
Exactly.
Christopher was
Yeah.
just used as a pawn conveniently in that
Exactly.
moment. A
And
trigger man who wouldn't say no.
Christopher even says to the cop, it doesn't matter whether you actually kill my father or not. It's Tony wants me to kill you. And that's all that
Yeah.
matters.
Yeah.
So he doesn't seem to deal well with that. This is what he's wanted ultimately, to be a gangster, to be in the family, to be a rising star, to be Tony's protege. And it's exactly what he's getting. And Tony says to Melfi, I can only trust blood. I can't trust all my other friends. I'm going to start using Christopher as a proxy in all my decisions. And that's exactly what Christopher wants, to be positioned as the heir apparent. But the pressure gets to him, I think.
You're my nephew, Christopher. And I love you. And that's the only reason you're alive right now. Or anybody else. Anybody. They would have their fucking intervention right to the back of their head. You and me, we're close. We've done a lot of things for each other.
The cop shot my father. I know what you're telling me. I'll never forget that.
This is how you repay me. I gotta worry if you're gonna flip over a nickel bag of white powder.
No, Tony, never.
You lied to me. I told you were the future of this family. I gave you that responsibility, and you looked me in the eye, and you accepted it, and you were fucking high.
Tony.
Shut up. Tomorrow morning, you're gonna go with Patsy up to this rehab place in Pennsylvania. You're going in. You're staying in. You're going to every fucking session, and you're going to keep your mouth shut. Now, if you need anything at all, Patsy's going to be half a mile away from you in a motel. Do you understand what I'm saying to you? Huh? Do you understand?
Tony, I'm sorry.
Were he sober? Do we think Christopher is that capable?
I don't know if he's capable as from a leadership position. I think he's very capable in terms of wet work, disposing of bodies and things like that. He can run a crew, he can earn money, but I'm not sure if he could make those really tough sort of strategic decisions.
Yeah.
That's a good point, yeah. Tony would really need to groom him. I mean, he is quite young. He's only sort of late 20s or something. So by the time he was 40, maybe he'd be much more capable.
Maybe. I mean, I think part of what's so endearing about his relationship with Adriana is that they're both not particularly smart. So it's kind of fun to watch them just muddling through and, having their very earnest conversations where they're not really seeing the big picture and, this or that, like when she tries to get him to flee later and he's like, oh yeah, I could write my memoirs,
I could, in terms of me being a male model, I could probably do that, but I don't want to hang out with those people.
Oh, being a male model, I forgot that one. And it's sort of sad in this season because, again, this is another weird one, like Silvio, who we most of the time like, and then he turns around and punches that poor Tracy. I most of the time like Christopher, but he'll haul off and punch Adriana, and it's shocking. It happens more than once in this season. But this season also is where they're against both of their wills, and well, actually, Christopher isn't even aware of it, moving further apart because she's secretly involved with the feds now. And so she's keeping a massive secret. He routinely always has to keep secrets from her, of what his daily work is like. And it's like these two that could maybe save each other, and I believe their love is real if they got the hell out of there. It's not going to happen for them. It's clear, throughout this whole season. I don't think there's ever a hope that they'll disentangle or I actually did hope in earlier episodes that she would confess to Christopher about what was going on. Of course, it didn't really work out for her when she finally does.
I don't understand why they don't. Whenever someone gets turned by the feds or propositioned by the feds, I don't see why they don't just come to their boss straight away before they've actually done anything. Like, let them know that the feds are onto me. They're going to try and turn me. Let's try and work together. Like, just say I'm not going to tell them anything about you, but just so you know, they've got something on me. Maybe we can try and work something out to sort of screw them up or something.
Totally, yeah, right on day one. Like, and this is what I mean about like kind of the lack of intelligence, because it seems like the feds use that with Adriana, right? Her sort of ignorance of what
the feds are very manipulative. Like, they try and imply that Christopher will go down if you don't help us, but they actually don't have as much power
because of what's going on in your club, and
they try and pose like they're their friends and we're trying to help you and we'll get you out of this. It's not you we want, and so that kind of gets them in. It compromises them, but ultimately they don't have as much power as Adriana or Pussy thinks they do. If Pussy had it straight away and told Tony, they've got me for drugs. Like, maybe you can support my family if I have to do prison.
Yeah, agreed. I mean,
they're so messed up. It's like they feel completely alone once they've been caught.
Yeah, I wonder how it would have played out had Adriana gone home that very day and said, this happened today. We need to tell Tony. I don't know. It just seems like maybe they would have played it differently, because by the time she confesses, obviously it does no good to say, well, I haven't given them anything of value. It's been going on for a year at that point, and she's brought this Danielle into their home and into their clubs and whatever.
Because they might even find a way of, because they could actually try and screw over the feds. Like,
that's what I mean. Do they ever think about like a double agent?
Yeah, a double agent, definitely. They could feed them wrong evidence and actually embarrass the feds. Like, they could set up a meet, and then it could turn into something else, and that could, because the feds aren't on as steady ground as we think they are. Like, if something goes wrong, they might get sapped of funding or put on a different case or something.
Yeah.
But I guess Tony doesn't know that. Like, they loom much larger than we see them to be.
Yeah.
But there was a good point about secrets that you mentioned. I think Christopher and Adriana are both carrying around a lot of secrets in this season, and you even see Adriana start to take drugs at various points because of the stress of having to work with the feds and that betrayal that she sees herself.
IBS, and she's just being eaten up by the secrets she's keeping.
It just devours them from the inside. And Chris as well. Tony is usually calling on Chris at these various moments, like with the death of Ralph. Chris is privy to a lot of information and a lot of murders and a lot of disposed bodies. Richie is another one that no one else is. So he's carrying around a lot of sort of vile stuff that goes on behind the scenes that no one else does, and he has to sort of carry that with him. So that might be another reason that he uses drugs to escape or to relieve himself. But you mentioned the intervention. That is definitely one of the best scenes in the series.
I mean, it's so screwed up. Again, Adriana's sitting there with a black eye in the intervention, just so screwed up. And Tony is listening patiently until they reach the part of the accusation where he finds out that Christopher killed Cosette, the dog, by sitting on her. And then he just loses his mind. He's like, I ought to break your neck, you little prick. And then they're each taking turns.
Paulie's reaction to that is hilarious. He's like, you killed the dog? Why? Was it barking?
Yeah.
Psycho.
Funny. And then they're all taking turns, sort of reading out their grievances. And Silvio's is something like, one day I came into work and your head was half in the toilet. Your hair was wet with toilet water. It was disgusting.
Disgusting. I know. And Paulie's like so blunt. He's like, you're weak, you're pathetic, you're a disgrace to everyone around you.
Yeah, just general insults. And then, finally disintegrates into, punching, broken coffee tables.
It is
Just
so
so
perfect. It's exactly how
yeah,
the Sopranos intervention would play out, and
yeah.
it is so darkly comedic. I mean,
It's
out
so
of context, the things we're discussing sound really dark and serious, and they are to an extent, but it's so
yeah,
sort of entwined with such comedy and such absurdness.
yeah. I mean, yeah, the things I laugh at, in the moment, and then later, if you look back at it, you're like, that's some
Yeah.
pretty twisted stuff,
I mean, you're
especially with
laughing through sort of split fingers just watching the
yeah.
craziness that's happening.
So anyway, Christopher ends up finally in rehab. And I can't remember, does he get out at the end of the season or beginning of season 5? But he's in there
No, he
for
does.
at least a
He is out on
month.
the final episode. He gets out. Yeah.
Final episode. Okay, so he'll be clean by the end of season 4.
Yep, that's right. Yeah.
All right, and then we get who else we have stars of season 4? We see a
Paulie.
lot of Johnny Sack.
Yeah, we do. Paulie has a sort of a similar storyline to Kamala in terms of moving away from Tony and feeling resentful towards Tony and wanting to get a bit more agency and independence in his life.
Yeah,
And he contemplates going into the Lupitazzi family, and he starts cozying up to Johnny Sack, who's Carmine Lupitazzi's underboss.
again, not very admirable behavior there. I'm surprised at Polly, even Polly, on that for being so underhand. I mean, he's actually setting himself up to take Tony's place. It's just,
He is, yeah. It shows
you know,
that even though these guys are friends, it can be pretty cutthroat at times.
yeah.
There's an extent to their friendships.
And
But it's also he still sees Tony as a friend. He still sort of loves Tony.
yeah.
It's this
It's almost like a
conflicting.
nephew or something.
Because he says when Silvio confronts him about his attitude lately, he says, Tony and I have a relationship that can never be broken. I'm sick of having to try and be the number one earner every week. So there is still loyalty there, but it's entwined with this kind of self-delusion that he can offer information to Johnny Sack without there being serious repercussions. And he does start to see himself, maybe I could take Tony's place. I don't think he thinks Tony's going to be killed. That probably
you
would
don't?
be the outcome. Well,
how else would he be dethroned? I mean,
I think you probably could be dethroned without Tony being. I don't know. I don't think he's thinking clearly. Like, I don't think it's in his mind that Tony would be killed. I don't think he would abide that from Carmine and Johnny Sack. Like that's too far for Paulie. But I do think he, if Carmine appointed him as the head of the family, he'd be okay with that, or at least a position of power, like a go-between, maybe between New York and New Jersey. The way sort of Johnny operates, I don't know, because the New York family is always trying to, I guess, colonize New Jersey and make them a sort of a sub-level of New Jersey.
Yeah.
But they're always their own sort of family. And we do get a lot of problems because of Paulie sort of speaking out of
repeating
hand.
the weight joke.
The weight joke becomes
Johnny
a
Sack's
huge issue,
wife becomes a huge thing. I mean, people nearly get killed over it. It's ridiculous.
There's also a really bizarre scene where Chris and Silvio go to, is it Boston, to seek out like this elderly hit squad?
Strange people.
It's so creepy. They're all like blind and
oxygen tanks and
they're like the Manson family or something.
That was really, really weird.
So yeah.
Was it Uncle June who recommended those guys?
He did, yeah.
Yeah.
Don't mention heroin.
Oh man.
Well, I mentioned that the Mafia isn't a big sort of role in this season, but there is a bit towards the end with some tensions between New York and New Jersey over, is it the HUD scam, I think? And
the HUD housing scam.
They wouldn't have known about unless Paulie was talking out of
That's right. That's the other big thing he did. I mean, and what cheek? They want 40%. I don't know how these things work, but 40% sounds like an outrageous amount.
Yeah, it's
non-negotiable.
They didn't do anything. They had nothing to do with that.
It was
deal.
just
That
like,
was all Tony.
their cut, kick up to us kind
they
of thing.
They just expect 40%? To. They're like, yeah, it's like a corporation or it's like Kmart. They think they're entitled to just monopolize the entire territory. And
so I guess this is the season where we get little Carmine for the first time when Tony goes down to see him in Miami to try and get him to reason with his dad, who's not budging on this 40% thing.
Yeah, little Carmine. Yeah, I think it is.
Gosh.
Yeah. He's hilarious.
He thinks he's so profound. That's what's funny about him. He's always imparting his,
philosophizing.
quasi wisdom. Yeah. Something in the Miami restaurant scene, they're talking about this whole thing with Carmine and Johnny Sack and, the guy resenting the power of the underling or whatever. And he's like, I'm reminded of Louis the whatever, his finance minister, something. Built the chateau that outshone Versailles. It's just like, oh, stop. Please stop.
I love the grandiosity. And Tony's just like, what was the point of that story?
Yeah, exactly. But sometimes Tony will pick up on his little, patter. Like I know, I remember in that same scene, little Carmine's like, "Well, John's always been a pragmatist." Well, for the rest of the series, Tony is referring to John as the pragmatist. It's like, that's pretty funny, considering I'm sure he has no idea what pragmatism actually is. But yeah, so Johnny Sack is more prevalent. I guess we've talked about that with Paulie in this season.
Johnny Sack's interesting in terms of he really loves his wife, and he doesn't
I know.
sort of sleep around. He's very that's pretty rare in the mafia world that we see.
Yeah, I actually like Johnny Sack.
I like him too. He's very arrogant and he causes a lot of problems for Tony's, but he's also like, you want someone who's in control and someone who stresses order, and it's all about business. Like he's not a psycho. He's not one of the Ralph figures or even the Paulie figures.
Yeah,
it's
he
business.
has a cool head.
We want the least amount of collateral damage possible. As long as things run smoothly, as bad as the mafia is, that he's almost like the devil, he's the one you want at the top because he's going to maintain some level of separation between the criminals and the citizens.
Yeah, even when the rules are a little bit archaic, like you get to kill the guy who insults your wife or whatever, he is following those rules. And he seems, he's a gentleman. He is in love with his wife. And he's truly distraught when he catches her eating those ho-hos in the basement or whatever.
He's so sweet. He's like, enjoy your salad.
Yeah. Yeah, I like Johnny. Let's see. And we got the racehorse, Pyomai, in this season.
Yep, Pyomai.
And I honestly, there are several scenes in this season that I can't watch. And one of them is the death of the horse. I close my eyes. I've never actually seen what happens when he goes out to the barn after the fire. I listen, but I don't look. I'm afraid to see a burnt horse.
Funnily enough, we don't see it.
Okay.
Tony, they find the horse and it's under a blanket, and Tony lifts it up and the trainer says don't. But all you see is Tony's expression. It's this look of grief, and then he closes it. And the saddest scene is the tractor driving away and dragging the horse away under the cloth. It's almost an echoing of Tracy, in a way.
Yeah, it is.
Because it's this person who had no involvement in crime or the lifestyle. It's just this creature that was killed for no reason other than pure, sadism or something. It's something he really takes to heart.
And the credit goes right in Ralphie's bank, just like Tracy.
Yeah, it's very coldly capitalistic.
Yeah, and I mean, as far as fueling what Tony ends up doing to Ralph, I think there are multiple reasons, right?
There are definitely, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we talked about the animal. I'm always interested about what the animals mean, and I don't think I've really settled on anything, but I really like the idea that the animals provide some kind of connection to Tony, to his empathy and his conscience that is constantly repressed. So to have that thing
absolutely
killed,
believe that.
It elicits such a violent, almost irrational rage from Tony because something that he really poured his heart into was killed.
And he needs to avenge that innocence, the wrong that was done to that innocence.
He can quarantine his conscience for a lot of the time, and obviously with Tracy he has to sort of suppress it because it's too entwined with his business and his life and his family and all that. But this was just a purely innocent creature. It had no involvement in anything, and it was killed for no other reason than, Ralph needed some extra money.
And I almost think, Ralph could have saved himself even if it wasn't a genuine display of sympathy. He could have saved himself in the moment where Tony was giving him the opportunity, saying, "Poor horse, poor innocent creature," or words to that effect. And Ralph just didn't bite. He didn't say, breaks my heart, that poor horse. He didn't say that. That could have saved him. But, Ralph's
the
worried
refusal.
about his son.
Yeah.
His son's in the hospital fighting for his life. He's not worried about a horse. He was just being honest.
I think it's the refusal, the line, whoever did this, I think Ralph says, it really sets Tony off because it
did us a favor or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a favor, yeah. He just can't abide it. It is really, ultimately, it's horrible that a horse killed, but as everyone says to Tony, it's really sad, but it's just a horse. But to Tony, it wasn't just a horse, and he just goes ballistic on Ralph, and he makes a decision that is so, irrational. It's very unlike Tony to think in those
completely.
terms. He's usually very
he just made a huge mess, literally. Yeah.
Yeah, and that causes huge problems. Like Ralph was a huge part of his business. He brought in the most money. He was very instrumental to the waterfront development. There was connection to New York, obviously. That's going to cause problems. But it's just like a line that Ralph crossed that he just cannot abide. I really think it does go back to the unresolved issues with Tracy, and that always stuck in Tony's craw, and it's
Yeah.
just one step too many. And there's a great shot after they've disposed of Ralph's body where he goes into the dressing room and he sees a picture of Tracy, and it's, there's nothing said, but
Yeah.
there's some level of
And
justice maybe.
yeah, and I think there's also a little point there of killing the other guy who first touched Valentina. There's a little bit of that
Oh yeah,
get,
yeah.
that gets added
Not so
there.
noble.
Yeah, not so noble.
Yeah,
But it's kind of like the thing that happens with Artie. Artie makes the point from the hospital when Tony lent him the money to do that stupid Armagnac importation deal. You're always calculating, you're always looking, several moves ahead and weighing everything out. And I think all these things do, even before a crazy blind rage act like that, all these things do go in that bank. And I do think Valentina was another little mark, in the let's get rid of Ralph column, just because that was he was there first.
Yeah, it's very off-putting the way he thinks he has a. It also goes back to Irina, like he beats that is it a
Yeah,
congressman
absolutely.
or one of the government officials that he
The
has.
assemblyman, yeah.
The assemblyman, because he thinks he has some kind of claim on Irina because he was with her before, and
Yeah.
it's
He
so
actually works
misogynistic.
himself up into tears over a Motown song in the car on his way to go beat that guy. He's so.
That's right.
He's maudlin in his self-pity.
Exactly. Yeah. I think it ties into the midlife crisis thing that I don't know, he's not happy with his life, and he was happy with Irina. He was sort of carefree and childlike with Irina. There was no responsibilities, and I don't know, maybe that summoning that up again, it seemed to press on his mortality, but at the same time, it was this misogynistic thought of she's mine. She was mine first. Yeah. Get away from her. And I think you see that with Valentino as well. He has to acquire Valentino from Ralphie.
Making sure first that they weren't having real sex. So, and there's this whole thing, but still sticks with him that she was Ralph's girlfriend first. And I think that also fueled some of the attack on Ralph.
She
wasn't the breaking point. The horse was definitely the breaking point, but Tracy, Valentina, it all went into that.
For sure, yeah. And I love how that episode ends with him waking up and the bing's empty and it's daylight, and he's kind of calling out for Christopher. And Christopher's gone off to get high or something.
Right.
So that was great in terms of Tony as a father figure and trying to be a good person and help Christopher, and he just keeps running away from him. It's always this tension between Tony the sociopath and Tony the moral person that is slowly shrinking.
Yeah.
But you mentioned Artie. We can just spend a few minutes on that. I mean, we haven't really talked about Artie that much, but Artie's a very sort of pathetic character, but I can't help but like him.
Yeah, I like him too, but he is so pathetic. Yeah, that his crushes for one thing. First on Adriana, and then is it Elodie, the hostess, are just awful. I think he gets his ear pierced for Adriana. Comes to hang out at her club with his freshly pierced ear, and then that earring is later ripped out by Elodie's brother when he's handing his ass to him and Artie's trying to collect his money.
There's a lot of that midlife crisis with the adult characters. This mix of tragedy and comedy.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what more to say about Artie. Really, he's just.
He looks up to Tony. Like, he tries to be. He's legitimate. He's one of Tony's non-criminal friends, and. Yeah, it is interesting how he idolizes Tony as this like source of masculinity, and he wants to be like him, but he doesn't at the same time. He keeps flirting with that idea, and he keeps approaching it. When he tries to intimidate the Frenchman, he feels so impotent and angry in his impotence that he can't be like Tony, and he can't get his money back.
Do you think that's really what eats him up. With the way that whole Armagnac and the loan and the not able to recover the money on his own, and then having to get Tony to go get it out of the guy, and the suicide attempt, all that crap that Artie goes through. Do you think that in that moment he realizes that Tony burnt down his restaurant, his first restaurant?
He knew that from. He's known that.
Did
he know
that for sure? Oh, okay. I didn't know. I didn't know that Tony ever admitted it to him, or I knew Livia told him that, but I thought Tony issued such a denial that Artie maybe wanted to believe that it wasn't true, but maybe not.
Yeah, Livia tells him in season 1, and he pulls a gun on Tony, and Yeah, Tony says, "Why would I do that? Why would I be that stupid?" And he sort of seems to relent and run off, but then he brings it up again at Livia's funeral, and he's going to
Okay,
tell
so
everyone.
he was already convinced of
So it's
that.
always, it's always there. I think it's always in his crawl that he strongly suspects Tony did that. But I mean, his business is rebuilt at this point, so I don't know how much it still weighs on him. But yeah, I think it's more that feeling of impotence, and I think he's going through a divorce at this time, and he feels like he's getting old, and yeah.
Yeah. Definitely midlife crisis.
But I like Artie. I think he's an important kind of another audience surrogate. The people who kind of romanticize Tony's lifestyle and the masculinity that he projects.
Yeah.
Tony
decides to stop going to therapy this season.
That's true, yeah.
Briefly, though, right? I think he's back pretty early in season 5.
Yeah, I mean, almost immediately his wife tries to separate him, and
barely worth a mention.
He calls up Melfi, but no, that is a good point. He feels like he's found some kind of stability, and he also feels like the therapy sessions are pointless. Like they're just running around in circles at this point. They're not actually reaching any new breakthroughs. He hasn't had a panic attack in a while, and he feels like he's on top of the world at this point. Like everything is going his way, but ultimately it's because he's suppressing his conscience, his morality. He's detaching himself and just becoming this robotic, ruthless businessman that is very hard to sympathize with.
Yeah. So should we talk about Whitecaps?
Yeah.
We have any other really important things in this season, but that episode is just powerhouse.
I think it's my favorite episode of the series.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
I think so.
Yeah, it is high drama, that's for sure. I wanted to look it up. I didn't get a chance, but I wonder if it won anything or was it nominated for Emmys or anything.
I think it won like the most awards of any episode.
I bet.
I'll have a check. I'm sure it won all the acting awards.
Yeah, this is what's been in the mail since season 1 for Tony and Carmela, the big showdown where she finally reaches her breaking point with his cheating. And on the heels of that call from Irina, mean little Irina, who can't wait to tell Carmela that Tony is sleeping with Svetlana. And like we talked about before, it's because Carmela knows Svetlana. Svetlana was Tony's mother's caregiver. She was Junior's caregiver. Someone that I think Carmela says, I drank vodka with her the night your mother died. I mean, it's just heartbreaking that she can't stomach. That it just would be put in her face like this, and with people, and yet another woman she's acquainted with.
Calm.
Just get out, Tony. Don't even say anything.
I'm not going anywhere, and you know it. So let's just lie down. We'll calm down.
Get your hands off of me! Don't you touch me ever again.
Where's AJ?
So you've had a one-legged one now, huh? That's nice. You've had quite a time on my watch. The preschool assistant, the weightlifter.
At least I never stole from you.
Who stole, Tony? Who, me?
My own wife, 40 grand, from the bird feeder.
Bird feeder, listen to yourself. You sound demented. But you want to hit me, Tony, go ahead. Just go away, please. I can't stand it anymore.
And she finally confesses the even more shocking, because he sleeps with hundreds of women, fact that she's been in love with somebody else for a year. Furio.
Yeah, and she says, and like a cancer victim, remembering that they're sick, you came walking down the stairs every morning.
That was just... Yeah, I wish I could remember more quotes from that episode, because she's incredible.
It's such a climax. Like, we always think of the Mafia climaxes and conflicts and showdowns, but this is like, I feel like this is ultimately the centerpiece of the series. This showdown between Tony and Carm over their marriage, like that is such a rich part of the series. Probably more important than the Mafia stuff is those family dynamics that are most important with Tony and his wife. And it just spills out. It's on hyperdrive, this whole episode.
Yeah.
All of the resentments that have been building up for years are released, and they're just wounding each other. They're just fighting with words and tearing each other, strips off each other. And
when he says, "Oh, you would much rather be, you wish you would have married that other guy who would have given you, a Hyundai and a little gold heart on a chain." Oh, it's just brutal, just like shoving her own complacent materialism right back in her
Yeah,
face.
and the hardest thing is he's probably right. She thinks he's probably right that she wouldn't have liked that. She likes the luxury and the
He
lifestyle
is right. That's
of
why,
being a
that's why
mafia
it's so
wife.
wounding.
But again, the
Yeah.
wound. He also says like the ultimate betrayal for Carmela is not that he sleeps with other women, but that he has relationships with other women. And he
Yeah.
says, you want to know why I enjoy talking with her. It wasn't the sex. It was the fact that she's been through things. She's had a hard life. She's been kicked down and got back up again. I could have a conversation with her about something other than, the living trust and
Right.
school fees and the air conditioning bill and all that. It was something
Yeah.
outside of mundane domesticity
Yeah.
and suburban life. It was a real.
Which is so unfair because Carmela is a perfectly intelligent woman who is completely walled off from most of his life
Yeah,
and
and that's how he wanted
relegated.
it. Like
It's absolutely
she is an
relegated to
intelligent
that role.
person, and she wants
Yeah.
to be engaged in culture and conversation and things, but he doesn't want that. He doesn't want her
No.
going out and being a real estate agent. He wants to keep her in the home, in the stereotypical housewife role, raising the kids, making
Yeah.
meals. That's the role he wants. That's the role he pressured her to be in, and now he's resenting her for being that.
Yeah. Absolutely. He doesn't want her in joining a book club or starting an internet business or anything else. He wants her making the lasagna and that's it.
Yeah.
Raising the kids. Yeah.
It's like they've learned how they're supposed to act from their parents, and they've tried to embody those roles, and they've both been unsatisfied with it. Tony's unsatisfied with the role he's made out of his wife, and Carmela's unsatisfied with the role she's been forced to make. Like, neither of these people are happy in this arrangement. They probably would be happier if they had a more, equal gender dynamic or equal engagement in work and home life and family life and all that. But they've been taught that that's not the way to do it. They're sticking to the old ways, the traditional ways that Tony was raised in with his parents.
And Tony keeps separate women for all of those other things.
But I think something you see in season 6 is there is more of an equality and more of a partnership in their marriage. And
I do feel like this is the episode that clears the decks, for them. When they come back together, it's real.
There is a newfound respect that Tony finds in
agree.
Carmela, and Carmela does branch out, and she is able to become her own person and develop business projects of her own and creativity and all that. So I think their marriage does. I mean, we can talk about that in a future episode, but their marriage does improve a lot after this and then the next season. They do find a mutual understanding and respect, and they do break out a bit more from those gender roles that they've been languishing in for so long.
Yeah. This is where it all exploded, and then it starts to rebuild after this episode. All right. Should we move on to season 5?